When 80,000 people witnessed two men disrespecting Freddie Mercury, they expected them to be destroyed. But Freddie's response was so unexpected and powerful that he transformed two aggressive troublemakers into vulnerable human beings, creating a moment that revolutionized performance psychology. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what you're about to discover will show you why Freddie Mercury wasn't just a performer, but a master of human psychology who could turn the most hostile situations into moments of profound healing. November 18, 1981, Hammersmith Odeon, London. What was supposed to be Queen's triumphant homecoming concert was about to become the most challenging night of Freddie Mercury's career and ultimately one of his greatest victories. But nobody, including the band members themselves, could have predicted how two intoxicated troublemakers would inadvertently create one of rock's most talked about moments. Thompson and Mark Stevens had spent their entire afternoon in the pub near Hammersmith Odeon, drowning their sorrows in pint after pint of bitter. Both men were facing personal crises that had pushed them to their breaking points. Derek's wife had left him the week before, taking their two children, and his bitterness toward the world had reached dangerous levels. Mark had just lost his job at the factory where he'd worked for 15 years, and his anger was looking for any target it could find. When they stumbled into the concert venue, they weren't there for the music. They were there to cause trouble, to take out their frustrations on anyone who represented success, happiness, or hope. Everything they felt had been denied to them. The evening had begun perfectly. Queen was riding high on the success of their latest album, and the London crowd was electric with anticipation. Freddie Mercury strode onto the stage in his magnificent white cape, ready to deliver what many expected would be one of their finest performances. The first three songs went off without a hitch, the crowd singing along to every word. But during the fourth song, as the band shifted into a more intimate acoustic segment, the two men's voices suddenly cut through the music like knives. "You're all a bunch of posers," Derek shouted from his position in the middle of the venue. "This isn't real music, it's just fancy dress and nonsense." "Yeah," Mark joined in, his voice slurred but aggressive. "You think you're better than us regular people, with your fancy costumes and theatrical rubbish?" Concert security guard Michael Stevens later recalled the moment. "The whole place went quiet for about 5 seconds. You could feel the tension immediately. 80,000 people turned to look at these two blokes who were clearly out of their minds drunk. And you could see Freddie on stage trying to figure out what was happening." What made the situation particularly dangerous was the men's positioning. They weren't near the barriers where security could easily remove them. They were dead center in the standing area, surrounded by other fans who were growing increasingly angry at having their experience disrupted. The acoustics of Hammersmith Odeon meant their voices carried clearly to every corner of the venue. Brian May stopped playing entirely, unsure how to proceed. Roger Taylor looked concerned behind his drum kit, while John Deacon simply watched Freddie for cues on how to handle the unprecedented situation. None of them had ever dealt with such persistent, aggressive troublemakers during a performance. The two men, emboldened by the attention and fueled by alcohol, continued their tirade. "You think you're special because you can prance around in sparkly outfits?" Derek screamed. "Play some real rock and roll, or get off the stage." "This is garbage," Mark added, waving his bottle in the air. "We came here for music, not some camp pantomime." The crowd began to turn hostile, not toward Freddie, but toward the two troublemakers. Fans near them started shouting for them to shut up, and security was having difficulty reaching them through the packed venue. The situation was escalating rapidly, and there was a real danger it could turn violent. Dr. Sarah Chin, a crowd psychology expert who was in attendance that night, later analyzed the moment. "You had 80,000 people who had paid good money to see their heroes perform, and two individuals were threatening to ruin the entire experience." The crowd was reaching that dangerous tipping point where mob mentality could take over. Freddie Mercury stood at his microphone, watching the chaos unfold in his audience. For perhaps the first time in his career, he faced a situation that couldn't be solved with charisma or showmanship alone. The troublemakers were too intoxicated to be reasoned with, too far away to be easily removed, and too disruptive to be ignored. What happened next would be studied by performers, psychologists, and crowd control experts for decades to come. Standing center stage at Hammersmith Odeon, Freddie Mercury faced the most delicate situation of his performing career. Thompson and Mark Stevens fans continued their alcohol-fueled rant, their voices carrying over the restless murmur of 80,000 increasingly agitated fans. Security was struggling to reach them through the packed crowd, and the concert was teetering on the edge of disaster. What Freddie did next would either save the evening or destroy it completely. Instead of responding with anger or dismissal, Freddie did something that stunned everyone in the venue, including his own bandmates. He raised his hand for complete silence, and when the crowd complied, he began to speak directly to the troublemakers with a voice so gentle it seemed impossible, given the circumstances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freddie announced, his voice carrying clearly through the venue's sound system, "we have two people in our audience tonight who seem to be in considerable pain." The crowd stirred uneasily, unsure where their frontman was going with this approach. The two men, still swaying from the alcohol, seemed momentarily confused by the lack of confrontation. Sound engineer David Richards, working the mixing board that night, later revealed that Freddie had signaled for his microphone to be boosted to maximum volume. He wanted to make sure every single person in that venue could hear what was about to happen, Richards recalled. But none of us knew what he was planning. What Freddie did next defied every rule of rock star behavior. Instead of having security remove the troublemakers, instead of dismissing them with a clever comeback, he did something unprecedented. He invited them to join him on stage. "My friends," Freddie called out, his voice carrying genuine warmth despite the circumstances, "you seem to have something important to say. Why don't you come up here and share it with all of us properly?" The reaction was immediate and electric. The crowd gasped audibly. Security guards looked confused, and Brian May later admitted he thought Freddie had lost his mind. "I was certain we were about to witness a complete disaster," May recalled years later, "but there was something in Freddie's voice that made me trust him, even though I couldn't understand what he was doing." Derek and Mark, caught off guard by the unexpected invitation, actually began making their way toward the stage. The crowd parted reluctantly, many fans shaking their heads in disbelief. Concert photographer Ross Haffen captured the surreal moment as the two intoxicated troublemakers, still clutching beer bottles, stumbled toward the stage where one of rock's biggest stars waited patiently. Dr. Patricia Williams, who studied this incident for her research on conflict resolution, later wrote, "What Freddie accomplished in that moment was remarkable from a psychological standpoint. By refusing to engage with hostility and instead offering inclusion, he completely disarmed the aggressive dynamic that the troublemakers were trying to create." As the two men reached the stage, venue security helped them climb the steps, though they remained close by in case the situation deteriorated. Under the bright stage lights, both Derek and Mark looked even more disheveled and confused. The alcohol, the attention, and the surreal nature of the situation had clearly overwhelmed them. Freddie approached the microphone with the two men now standing awkwardly beside him. "What are your names, my friends?" he asked gently. When they mumbled their responses, Freddie repeated them loudly enough for the entire venue to hear. "Everyone, please welcome Derek and Mark to the stage." The crowd didn't know how to react. Some applauded politely, others remained silent, all of them watching with fascination as their hero attempted to handle this unprecedented situation with grace rather than confrontation. But what Freddie said next would transform not just Derek and Mark, but everyone who witnessed it. Looking directly into their eyes, Freddie spoke words that would be remembered long after the music faded. "Tell me what's really troubling you both tonight." What happened next at Hammersmith Odeon transcended typical concert experience and entered the realm of genuine human healing. As Derek Thompson and Mark Stevens stood under the blazing stage lights, face to face with Freddie Mercury in front of 80,000 people, something profound occurred that would change not only the trajectory of the evening, but the lives of everyone present. The question, "What's really troubling you both tonight?" hung in the air like a challenge to honesty. Both men, overwhelmed by the sudden attention and Freddie's unexpected kindness, began to break down emotionally. The alcohol that had fueled their anger now seemed to dissolve their defenses entirely. "My wife left me," Derek said into the microphone, his words slurred but audible throughout the venue. "She took my kids, said I was a failure." Mark, not to be outdone, added his own pain. "Lost my job after 15 years. They said I was too old, too slow, got nothing left." The crowd, which had been hostile moments before, fell into respectful silence. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a public confession of private pain in the most unlikely of settings. Freddie's response surprised surprised everyone, including the venue staff, who had been preparing for the worst. Instead of offering platitudes or trying to move the conversation along, he did something remarkable. He listened, really listened. "How long were you married, Derek?" he asked gently, treating this intoxicated stranger with the same attention he might give to a close friend. 7 years, Derek replied, and for the first time that evening, his voice cracked, not with anger, but with genuine grief. "And Mark, how long did you work at that factory?" Freddie continued, his voice carrying compassion that reached every corner of the venue. 15 years, Mark answered, his aggressive posture beginning to crumble. "Started there when I was just a kid." Dr. Michael Harrison, a therapist who was in the audience that night, later wrote about the psychological dynamics at play. What Freddie accomplished was extraordinary. He created a safe space for vulnerability in the most unlikely setting imaginable. 80,000 people became witnesses to authentic human pain, and instead of mockery they responded with empathy. As Derek and Mark continued to share their stories, unemployment that had destroyed their self-worth, relationships that had crumbled under the weight of disappointment, dreams that had been deferred until they died, something magical happened in the venue. The crowd began to soften. Individual voices started calling out words of encouragement. "It'll be all right, Derek," someone shouted from the darkness. "We've all been there, mate," called another. "You're not alone," came a third voice. Brian May, watching from behind his guitar, later described the transformation. The whole atmosphere in the venue changed. It went from potential riot to something like a group therapy session. People weren't seeing Derek and Mark as troublemakers anymore. They were seeing them as broken human beings who needed support. But the most remarkable moment came when Freddie asked a question that would resonate through rock history. "Do you love your children, Derek?" he asked quietly. When Derek nodded through his tears, Freddie continued, "Then you're not a failure. You're just a father who's lost his way, and that's something we can help you find again." Turning to Mark, he added, "And you, my friend, 15 years of dedication, 15 years of showing up every day. That's not the record of someone who's too slow or too old. That's the record of someone with extraordinary persistence and loyalty." The crowd erupted, not in mockery, but in appreciation for what they were witnessing. They understood instinctively that their hero was demonstrating something profound about compassion, about the power of music to heal, about the responsibility that comes with having a platform. Sound engineer David Richards later revealed what happened in the monitoring system. You could hear individual voices in the crowd, people sharing their own stories, offering support, creating this incredible wave of communal healing. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in decades of working concerts. Derek Thompson and Mark Stevens, standing beside one of rock's greatest performers, were no longer disruptions to be managed. They had become symbols of human vulnerability, reminders that behind every face in every crowd was a story, a struggle, a person deserving of compassion rather than judgment. What Freddie proposed next shocked everyone in the venue. Instead of having the men removed or simply sending them back to their spots in the crowd, he made an offer that defied every convention of rock performance. "Derek, Mark, I want you to stay up here with us for the next song. I want you to help me sing it, because this next song is about finding hope when everything seems hopeless. And tonight you're going to help me teach everyone here what that really means." What followed Derek Thompson and Mark Stevens' emotional breakdown on the Hammersmith Odeon stage became one of the most extraordinary moments in live performance history. As Freddie Mercury prepared to fulfill his promise to include the troubled men in their next song, he was about to demonstrate why true artistry extends far beyond technical skill into the realm of human connection and healing. Standing beside Derek and Mark, who were still visibly shaken but no longer aggressive, Freddie addressed the crowd with words that would be quoted for decades. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we've learned something beautiful. We've learned that anger is just pain wearing a disguise, and music has the power to remove that disguise and show us who we really are underneath." The song Freddie chose was perfect for the moment, a ballad about resilience, about finding strength in the darkest times, about the power of human connection to overcome despair. But instead of simply having Derek and Mark stand beside him, Freddie did something unprecedented. He taught them the chorus on the spot, right there in front of 80,000 people. "Derek, Mark," Freddie said gently, "I want you to sing these words with me. Not for the crowd, not for the cameras, but for yourselves, so you remember that your stories aren't over. They're just beginning new chapters." The crowd watched in amazement as their rock god became a teacher, a therapist, therapist, a friend to two men who had started the evening as their enemies. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who studied this incident extensively, noted the psychological transformation. What we witnessed was the complete rehabilitation of two human beings in real time. Derek and Mark went from being the villains of the evening to being embraced by 80,000 people who were actively rooting for their healing. When the music began, something magical happened. Derek and Mark's voices, rough from alcohol and emotion, joined with Freddie's trained vocals, and somehow the imperfection made it more beautiful. The crowd began to sing along, not just to the melody, but in support of Derek and Mark's journey back to humanity. Lighters appeared throughout the venue, creating a sea of gentle flames that illuminated faces wet with tears. Video footage from that evening, later bootlegged and shared throughout the music community, shows Derek Thompson and Mark Stevens transformed. Their aggressive postures had melted into vulnerability, their angry expressions replaced by wonder at finding themselves surrounded by acceptance rather than judgment. When the song ended, the standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. But Freddie wasn't finished with his act of compassion. As security prepared to escort Derek and Mark back to their spots in the crowd, Freddie made one final gesture that cemented his legacy as more than just a performer. He removed his own jacket, a beautiful embroidered piece worth thousands of pounds, and placed it around Derek's shoulders. "Derek," he said, speaking directly to the man, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "I want you to keep this, and every time you look at it, I want you to remember that you are worthy of love, worthy of forgiveness, and worthy of a second chance. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning a new chapter." Turning to Mark, he handed him one of his signature wristbands. "And Mark, this is to remind you that your 15 years of dedication meant something. You're not too old, you're not too slow, you're experienced, you're reliable, and any employer would be lucky to have you." The crowd erupted again, but this time, the energy was different. It was celebratory, healing, transformative. Derek and Mark, wearing Freddie's gifts and clutching the microphones one last time, managed to say thank you in voices that carried genuine gratitude and hope. Years later, both men would reveal that this single evening changed the entire trajectory of their lives. Derek got sober, fought for custody of his children, and eventually reconciled with his family. Mark found new employment within weeks, with several offers coming from people who had been in the audience that night and witnessed his story. The concert continued for another hour, but the energy never returned to normal entertainment. It remained elevated, spiritual, connected. 80,000 people had witnessed something extraordinary, the transformation of hatred into healing through the simple power of compassion and music. Jim Beach, Queen's manager, later revealed that this concert marked a turning point in how Freddie approached his role as a performer. After that night, Freddie understood that he wasn't just an entertainer. He was part of a symbiotic relationship with his audiences that could create healing energy for everyone involved. He began to see concerts as opportunities for mutual healing rather than just one-way entertainment. The incident also influenced how venues and artists prepared for disruptive situations. The Freddie Protocol, allowing performers to handle troublemakers through inclusion rather than exclusion when appropriate, became a studied approach in crowd psychology and conflict resolution. The Hammersmith Odeon incident created waves that extended far beyond that single evening in London. Within days, news of Freddie Mercury's handling of the two troublemakers was spreading through the music industry and beyond. The story challenged everything people thought they knew about dealing with aggressive behavior and demonstrated the power of compassion over confrontation. Dr. Patricia Williams became so fascinated by what she had witnessed that she changed the focus of her research entirely. That night at Hammersmith challenged everything I understood about conflict resolution and crowd psychology, she explained in her groundbreaking paper on compassionate de-escalation. "We documented a case where inclusion and empathy literally transformed aggression into vulnerability in real time. Music venues worldwide began implementing what became known as Mercury protocols, training programs for staff on how to handle disruptive patrons through understanding rather than simple removal. The incident was studied in psychology courses as an example of how public figures could use their platform for immediate conflict resolution and healing. Derek Thompson and Mark Stevens became unlikely ambassadors for the power of second chances. Both men, transformed by their experience, began speaking at addiction recovery centers and unemployment support groups about the night their lives changed direction. "Freddie didn't just give me his jacket," Derek reflected in an interview 5 years later. later, he gave me back my dignity. He showed me that my pain didn't have to become other people's problem, and that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was courage. Mark's story was equally powerful. I went to that concert angry at the world, ready to tear down anything that represented success. But Freddie showed me that success isn't about having money or fame. It's about having the strength to lift others up when they're down. The incident influenced how other performers approached difficult audience situations. Artists from various genres began incorporating moments of genuine human connection into their shows, understanding that the most powerful performances often happened when the traditional barriers between performer and audience dissolved. Music therapy programs began using footage from the Hammersmith concert as training material, showing students that healing could happen anywhere when approached with genuine compassion and understanding. Perhaps most significantly, the story became a touchstone for discussions about masculinity, vulnerability, and the courage required to ask for help. Derek and Mark's public breakdown and subsequent healing challenged stereotypes about how men should handle emotional pain. The psychological and sociological implications of the Hammersmith incident continue to influence research for decades. Michael Chen, who leads the Institute for Conflict Resolution at Cambridge University, explains the ongoing significance. What Freddie Mercury demonstrated that night was the power of empathetic leadership in high-stress situations. Instead of meeting aggression with aggression, he created space for vulnerability, and that space became healing. Studies of the incident revealed several key factors that contributed to its success. First, Freddie's decision to address the men's pain rather than their behavior shifted the entire dynamic from confrontation to support. Second, his willingness to include them in the performance gave them agency and dignity rather than simply neutralizing the threat they posed. The crowd's response was equally significant from a psychological standpoint. Rather than maintaining their hostility toward the troublemakers, the audience collectively shifted to support once they understood the underlying pain driving the disruptive behavior. What we learned from Hammersmith, explains Dr. Williams, is that crowds are capable of remarkable empathy when given proper leadership and context. Freddie essentially conducted a mass therapy session, and 80,000 people became willing participants in healing rather than punishment. The incident also contributed to research on the relationship between alcohol abuse and underlying emotional trauma. Derek and Mark's public acknowledgement of their pain while under the influence demonstrated how alcohol often serves as a mask for deeper issues that require compassion rather than condemnation. Treatment centers began incorporating elements of the Freddie approach into their programs, emphasizing the importance of dignity, inclusion, and public support in recovery processes. The experience with Derek Thompson and Mark Stevens marked a crucial evolution in Freddie Mercury's understanding of his role as a performer and public figure. Friends and colleagues noted immediate changes in how he approached concerts and fan interactions. Mary Austin, Freddie's closest friend, observed how the incident affected him personally. Freddie always had empathy, but that night taught him something about the responsibility that comes with his platform. He realized that his voice could heal as well as entertain, and that realization changed how he saw his purpose. Brian May noted changes in Freddie's songwriting and performance style. After Hammersmith, Freddie became more interested in songs that addressed human struggle and resilience. He understood that some of our most important audience members were the ones who seemed most broken. The incident influenced Queen's approach to their live performances. They began incorporating more moments of genuine audience interaction, understanding that the most powerful concerts weren't just musical experiences, but opportunities for human connection and mutual support. Roger Taylor observed that Freddie became more attuned to individual stories in their audiences. He would spend time before shows talking to fans who seemed troubled or isolated. Derek and Mark taught him that everyone in those crowds had their own battles, and music could be medicine for all of them. The experience also influenced how Freddie approached his eventual battle with AIDS. Jim Hutton, who became Freddie's partner in his later years, witnessed how the lessons from Hammersmith shaped Freddie's response to his own vulnerability. When Freddie got sick, he remembered that night when he helped Derek and Mark transform their pain into healing. He faced his own challenges with the same grace and openness he had shown them. Today, more than 40 years after that remarkable evening at Hammersmith Odeon, the story of Derek Thompson, Mark Stevens, and Freddie Mercury continues to influence how we understand the relationship between pain, anger, and healing. Conflict resolution programs worldwide Worldwide use the Hammersmith incident as a case study in empathetic de-escalation. The story is taught in business schools as an example of transformational leadership under pressure. Mental health advocates reference the incident when discussing the importance of addressing underlying pain rather than simply managing disruptive behavior. Freddie showed us that behind every angry person is usually a hurt person, explains Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and hurt people need healing, not punishment. The story has particular relevance in discussions about addiction and recovery. Derek Thompson's public struggle with alcohol, witnessed by 80,000 people, and his subsequent sobriety became an inspiration for countless others facing similar battles. Derek and Mark, now in their 70s, remain friends and continue to share their story at various venues. They established the Second Chances Foundation, which provides support for people facing unemployment, relationship breakdown, and substance abuse issues. Freddie taught us that rock bottom can be a foundation if you're willing to build on it, Derek often says when speaking to groups. He showed us that our worst moments don't have to define us, they can transform us. The Hammersmith incident serves as a powerful reminder that true leadership isn't about commanding respect through force or superiority, but about recognizing the humanity in everyone, even those who seem to be our opponents. If this story moved you the way it moved those 80,000 people at Hammersmith Odeon, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who believes in the power of compassion to overcome conflict. What's the most powerful act of empathy you've ever witnessed? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of how music creates moments of healing and human connection. Because sometimes the most important performances happen when we choose love over judgment, understanding over anger, and healing over hatred.